SpaceX take over Dish Network's role as the nation's fourth largest wireless carrier? And how much do we really know about 6G? Today, we're tackling two of the hottest topics in the wireless world. I'm Diana Gooverts, and this is the 5-9. Last week, Nokia and NYU held the 2025 Brooklyn 6G Summit to cover the latest and greatest with what's emerging in the forthcoming wireless standard. And 6G, of course, is set to replace 5G as the technology that underpins wireless networks. But we're still really early in the standard setting process, so it's hard to know what'll actually be included. But if the event was any indication, AI has a major part to play. We're going to get the down low from the event from our very own Dan Jones, who was on the ground there, but that's not all. We'll also be taking a look at the daytime soap opera that is Dish Network's story. That plotline includes a truly grabbing mix of optimism, try-hard spirit, failure, and betrayal. So we will get that story with help from Fierce Network executive editor Monica Alavin. And capping off the episode, you will get a sneak peek at what is coming at our Broadband Nation Expo event next week in Florida from one of the very people who helped plan it, Tommy Cliff. So let's get into the conversation. Dan, I wanted to start with a discussion about 6G. You just went to the Brooklyn 6G Summit. So I was wondering if you could share, what were your top three takeaways? What were the top three things that you heard discussed at that event?
I definitely heard a lot about what frequencies 6G will be on. And from what I can tell now, it seems that around 7 gigahertz is going to be the starter frequency for 6G, and then moving upwards from there. So that's the point one. Two, we saw a bunch of demos from Nokia and a lot of other people, but also some actual outdoor testing between Dallas and the Brooklyn 6G Summit, which used a very clunky, they call it user equipment. It's basically a prototype device for 6G and a 7 gigahertz antenna with a pre 6G radio, which was delivering data between those two sites. And then, obviously, there's a lot about AI for 6G because that's all anyone talks about these days.
I mean, you're talking to the right person if you're talking about AI, because that's my primary beat. And I imagine, because isn't the Brooklyn 6G Summit hosted or otherwise involved with Nokia, right? And they just signed a big deal with NVIDIA, correct?
Yep. Yeah, and you couldn't avoid. There was an NVIDIA keynote there. There were at least 3 NVIDIA demos there, and it was very much a kind of Nokia plus NVIDIA kind of situation.
What's your impression of what NVIDIA is trying to do in the telecom space, right? Because we're very familiar with them in the data center and AI networking space, but they seem to be newly targeting telecom. And so I'm kind of curious what your impressions were from that show.
They're not quite newly targeting telecom. They did actually do some kind of 5G acceleration stuff before that, but that's kind of been swept under the carpet because now they appear to be targeting 6G as their telecom inflection point, is what I called it in one of my stories. And I think that's because um, clearly AI is going to be a big part of 6G. So they're looking at as the point where people will start to use their GPUs as a telecom silicon kind of thing. I don't know exactly how well that will work because they're still quite expensive and quite power hungry. And I don't know that many carriers that are keen to spend that much money on that kind of equipment. But we shall see.
Yeah, I want to dig into that topic a little bit more in just a quick second. But the other thought occurred to me. I mean, is it too early to be talking about 6G or AI in 6G? Or maybe a better way to phrase the question is, what do we know about 6G so far, right? Like, where are we in the standards process? What do we really know about what this technology is going to hold for operators? What were your learnings from the event about that?
We don't know that much because I've been to a couple of the 6G summits. There's only been a couple of 6G summits. And the first one that I went to was all about sensing, and it was all about like very high kind of frequencies, like terahertz kind of frequencies. And now everyone seems to have moved onto a kind of gigahertz kind of level, and they still don't really know what it will use, but we do know, or at least I think I know, that 6G, as it stands at the moment, will be a gigahertz radio design, a new radio design with a with the 5G standalone core as the core, because operators do not want to change a core. It's so expensive to do, and they do not want to do it. So they're very keen on keeping a 5G standalone core, which is still an expense for many operators because they haven't even moved to that yet. So there we go.
I was gonna say they're gonna hang on to that core until they recoup that investment, and that doesn't seem
Yep.
to be coming many other ways, huh?
No, no.
So I wanted to touch on the whole GPU aspect of putting these in radio networks. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is your specialty and Monica's specialty, but that whole concept is part of what's known as AI RAN. Monica, I think you've covered this perhaps maybe in a little bit more depth. So, like, what is AI RAN? And what is it maybe not? That might be a better
Yeah.
question.
Well, yeah, I think it's a really good question because I think a lot of people are still trying to figure it out, right? But they have made some progress, and I think the AI RAN Alliance, I think it was launched in early 2024, if I remember correctly. And I remember the fall of 2024 being at a conference, and somebody said, was on the panel and said, well, if they want us to put GPUs in the base stations, then we'll put GPUs in the base stations. But there's a whole school of thought where people are very skeptical of whether that's really necessary. I mean, of course, NVIDIA wants you to put them in everywhere, but sorry, they maybe make no sense. And there's enough of the CPUs and the, as Dan said, the GPUs are add the cost, and they're power hungry and all these other things. But and also too, like some of the things I've heard some people who are studying, at T-Mobile, they're doing some heavy research with NVIDIA and Nokia and Ericsson. And I get the impression, well, they can't tell us everything they're up to, but I think they're still trying to figure a lot of stuff out, to be
Yeah,
fair.
and so I mean, what we're talking about here is kind of GPUs as part of the equipment that's in the field, but I know that there are also, AI on the RAN, AI
Yes.
for the RAN. So, like,
Mhm.
you break down that distinction really quickly, Monica.
Well, I've asked people that explain it over and over. I think sometimes they are on the same page, and sometimes they seem not to be. Like AI in the RAN, AI for the RAN, AI on the RAN, in for on. I mean, they're just different ways to implement it. I guess, like in some ways, it's going to be good for the network, improve the network, and you can optimize the network. Use AI to optimize. Maybe see where you need to move an antenna or something like this, and then in the RAN, getting data about the network again. That's very close to how you're going to use it to optimize the network. So I don't know. I think I find that it's a marketing logo and or lingo, I should say.
Speaking of not knowing where they're heading, maybe we can switch gears real fast and take a hard left detour over to talk about Dish Network and what, to me, from a outsider perspective, seems to be something of a collapse of what was supposed to be the fourth nationwide carrier in the US. So, just a little backstory for all of our listeners. As part of the merger between Sprint and T-Mobile, some of Sprint's assets got transferred to Dish, and Dish was meant to grow and scale and deploy a nationwide 5G network to become the replacement fourth carrier, right? So we had Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint. And when T-Mobile and Sprint merged, they wanted a fourth competitor for competition reasons, to keep prices down, all of that good stuff. That, to put it lightly, has not really panned out. And Monica, some of the recent developments involve spectrum sales and very angry creditors. Can we start with the spectrum issue? Because I know that's one of your specialties. So, what the heck is going on there?
You have to go back in the time machine, go way back to really May of this year. That's when the FCC chairman Brendan Carr sent a letter to EchoStar chairman Charlie Ergen, who also obviously oversees Dish, and basically accused him of like not using the spectrum fully to its best and highest use, and also questioned the 5G build out that Dish slash EchoStar has done. So that set off sort of a tizzy for EchoStar slash Dish slash Boost Mobile. And remember over the summer there were stories about how there's this dark cloud over EchoStar and Dish, and um, really the threat of bankruptcy was really close. They couldn't make business decisions because of this dark cloud from the FCC causing all these problems. And so then flash forward to this fall, and Charlie Ergen sells the spectrum to some of it to AT&T and some of it to SpaceX, and he's making more than $40 billion from this. So yeah, your creditors would kind of go like, okay, you're flush with cash, pay up, right? But no, I see it as a Charlie Ergen strategy where they're telling their creditors or their people who actually help them build their network. They're saying we can't pay you, or why don't you take a lower sum, and this kind of thing. And well, yeah, really threatening letters to these guys. And American Tower just filed a suit against Dish saying, we don't buy any of this because you've got $40 billion. So, yeah, pay up. It's all silly. Well, it also goes back to them, EchoStar, Charlie Ergen saying that they're calling it a force majeure, a French term that basically means this is a catastrophe, I guess I'd put it
Forces
that way.
outside their control force them to sell their spectrum and make gobs of money. But the argument, to be clear, is that EchoStar, who owns Dish, is saying Dish is a separate company, so
Yes,
EchoStar is not obligated to
correct.
pay the
Yes.
tower companies who built its 5G network, which they're now dismantling. Do I have that
Well,
straight?
yes, they are dismantling it. They haven't started dismantling it though. That's one of the things that came up in EchoStar's earnings call last week. They and then Charlie Ergen was asked about that, and he said, "Well, we have to talk to the regulators about that." So that makes you wonder, well, what are you cooking up here? Like,
He's going to sell it,
so
Monica. Okay,
sell
wait.
it.
So actually, for real, let's talk about that for a quick second, because there is a real possibility that they could sell it, right? So they already sold some of their spectrum to SpaceX, which owns Starlink, the satellite broadband provider.
Yeah.
What are the odds, or what are we feeling in our bodies about whether or not Dish goes ahead and sells that infrastructure that they've built to
Well,
SpaceX, who has
you know,
also gobs of money?
yeah, right.
And then
Well, and a lot of
SpaceX
people,
becomes that mythical fourth carrier that everybody wanted.
Well, that's the only way they can do it. So maybe.
Have anybody heard any interesting thoughts or speculation in the market, or is this all just kind of us playing around behind the scenes?
yeah, I haven't heard anything really real. Like who would buy Dish's network when that first sale came up, where they're selling the 2 gigahertz to SpaceX, and everybody said, "Well, Elon Musk is going to build a fourth network and replace everybody else." People were like, "Well, wait a minute. If he wants to do a terrestrial network, he's got a really cheap network he could buy from Dish right now, and he didn't." So don't, but how come they haven't decommissioned it yet?
Yeah. That's a
Hmm.
great question, and I think one that we'll have to keep watching. Uh, do we have any impressions of what a SpaceX entry into the market like? Are there things that we think Elon Musk does not understand about telecom, or would that actually work to his advantage? Could he be a disruptor in this space in a way that Dish couldn't be because they tried to play by the rules?
Well, I kind of thought that his friendship with the chairman of the FCC might get him a foot in the door if he ever wants to create a terrestrial network. But he could. He's joked too about buying Verizon.
I wonder if Dish would be cheaper for him, huh?
There'd be
Oh,
a lot of work to do, though. A
yeah.
lot of work.
And then a lot of regulatory headaches. I'm not sure he really wants to do that.
No.
Um,
And it would be interesting because I wonder where he would take it in terms of, you know, I mean, wireless networks have not exactly been the money makers that they once were. So my thought, just kind of spitballing here, is like, I wonder if they would want to play by those data privacy rules, or if those might go to feed some models that they're building in some of their other businesses, or I don't know. This is just a very interesting space to me. I like to have these playful conversations with you guys because there's so much happening in this space. uh, okay, Dan, let's talk final thoughts on 6G. What are you thinking is going to be the one thing in 6G that becomes a thing that nobody's really talking about yet?
The sensing stuff is very interesting. It's kind of basically like there could be a bunch of consumer and enterprise applications which are kind of related to also they call them personal area networks and things like that. So basically a very close in kind of 6G will be much closer. That's what I'm saying. 6G will be like be in your
Jacket
clothes.
almost, yeah.
Yep, yep.
All right. Monica, do you have a prediction for where all of the dish chips land?
I think a lot of this stuff are negotiation tactics. I think, boy, I don't know, because it kind of goes back to, how Dish is claiming this force majeure and all this kind of stuff, but they didn't really have to sell their licenses to SpaceX or AT&T. Something else could have happened there. Plus, but they did, and they got a lot of money for it. So I think I don't see how their arguments stand up in court.
Court is the key word there, right? I think we're going to see them in court.
Right.
Thank you guys for your time. Before we end for the day, I actually want to turn things over to Tommy Clift to talk to us a little bit about our upcoming Broadband Nation Expo show in Orlando, Florida. So let's talk to Tommy. Tommy, talk to us a little bit. The show is coming up. It's going to be running Monday through Wednesday. So who can we expect to see at the show?
Yeah, on the big name side, we've got some really cool ones. We've got Alan Sampson, who's the chief broadband officer over at T-Mobile. Erin Scarborough, she's working at the broadband and connectivity initiatives at AT&T. We also have the chief networking officer, Elad Nafshi, over at Comcast, and they're kind of giving that bigger player tier one perspective, where then we also have quite a few smaller leadership speakers from ISPs across the country. We have a pretty big uptick, over like 60 ISPs speaking this year. Compared to last year, it's a huge increase, and same in attendance as well.
All right. So, talk to me for a quick second about the vibe. I know that as BBNE has grown, it's also changed over the years. So, what is the vibe going to be like at this year's show? What kind of tweaks and changes can showgoers expect?
Yeah, it's actually this is my first time really being brought in to kind of support the speaker and content aspect of the show. And it was a kind of pivoting year for me to come in, where I think it's been perceived, especially when it was kind of the US Broadband Summit, as this state policy show. And there's a pretty big pivot, I think, to some extent for obvious reasons. There's a lot of uncertainty around BEAD. But there's also just I think a pretty big shift happening culturally and functionally within the broadband industry. And I think we're looking to really holistically bring in the whole ecosystem. So, we have this kind of phrase that we'd come up with, end-to-end broadband, meaning kind of the whole ecosystem from funding. And I think there's a bigger focus now on like the private capital piece, not just looking at BEAD or these big dollars that have stalled and gone through a lot of changes in the last year, and instead really that private public collaboration is still a huge piece. But I think we really want to like bring in all of the technologists, the AI piece, data centers. Like there's so much that broadband's going to be is this just underpinning force for, and want to have those discussions just as much as any sort of state policy conversation. So I'd say that's the biggest pivot, is that it's not, I suppose, maybe not just a pivot away from, but an expansion outside of just the state funding aspect.
And talk to me for a quick second about what you personally are looking forward to at the show. I mean, are there any speakers? Are there any topics that you are just itching to hear about or excited to delve into at the show?
Yeah, for me, so I mean, maybe it's no surprise. As an editor, I'm covering workforce issues, so I do lean towards that. I think there's some really exciting panels around that. We Broadband Nation obviously partnered with the state of Florida, so I was out filming, some of the workforce initiatives and the people actually building the infrastructure this year. So there's a panel highlighting that, the kind of collaboration from Miami-Dade College to, Leo Garcia, who's the broadband officer for Florida, and some folks at MasTech. So I'm excited for the workforce discussion for sure, but there's also some really cool panels this year. I think around the tribal sovereignty piece is going to be really exciting. We've got really great speakers across very different functions, from Robert Griffin over at the Choctaw Nation, also Angel Benali, who works at FirstNet, which is a very different discussion. Also John Garcia, who is pretty big broadband leader over in Hawaii, which is a really unique perspective across the funding and the build out dialogue. I am really excited about those discussions. But I was, on a prep call the other day, and there's a great session on municipal broadband going on at the same time. So I'm very much going to be like head in, head out in a lot of different sessions, because it's a good spread this year. I think that's the most exciting aspect, is it really is embodying that whole end-to-end concept, where it feels like there's discussions for everybody.
Awesome, Tommy. Thank you so much for your time. We are going to have a great show in Florida next week. I hope everyone is there. But if not, make sure that you check out some of our coverage. I know Tommy's colleagues and my colleagues, Masha Abaranova and our editor-in-chief, Liz Coyne, are both going to be at the show, so we will be watching what comes out. Until next time, this has been the 5-9, and we will catch you again soon.